Jeffrey Damon Younger is a professional liar. As shown in my last video, he's someone who has invented an entire narrative surrounding his trans daughter, forwarding her to be the victim of indoctrination, when really, he's just a shitty person. By the way, if you're new to this topic and don't have a grasp on what's going on, I definitely suggest starting with that video. It'll give you a fully referenced timeline of events, stuff I don't have time to go over again as it spans more than half a decade at this point. Returning to Mr. Younger, the reason he lies is pretty obvious. Besides all the attention and fame he's been receiving, something that has clearly gone to his head and inflated his sense of ego, Mr. Younger has also been receiving a lot of money, something he's not about to give up. I mean, this is a guy who was desperate enough to try and steal his ex-wife's truck when they divorced. It's therefore unsurprising that Mr. Younger would take to the transphobia grift, literally being paid to lie, to invent narratives that reinforce the worst prejudices held by his listeners. Which brings us rather nicely to the topic of today's video, and that is the way in which Mr. Younger lied about a court order he was showing on screen. Though before we can get round to checking that out, I of course need to give a content warning for the following topics: transphobia, child abuse, misgendering, theocracy, fascism, police violence, and gun violence. If you like our work and appreciate the research put into each video, please consider supporting the channel via Patreon. You can also support us by liking, commenting, and sharing our work on social media. Hi there, my name's Ethel Thurston, and today we'll be taking a look at the incredibly brazen way Mr. Younger lied to his audience. I'd just like to thank Kat for alerting me to this video. I always get really excited when someone who watches my content gets involved, does their own research, and sends me further stuff to talk about, so yeah, thank you. Returning to Mr. Younger's lies, what got him caught in this instance, somewhat ironically, was the fact that he showed the court order he was lying about during his presentation, presenting it as an attempt to bolster his trustworthiness.
I put the gag order up here because people actually don't believe what this judge has ordered. I just like to read parts of it to you.
People don't believe you? What on earth could have made them distrust you in the first place? Could it be that you constantly lie about the facts that Luna has seen no fewer than 4 separate professionals? Or the way in which what you tell the public versus what you say under oath are 2 very different things? Could it perhaps be the facts that you were caught lying to Child Protective Services, telling them you let Luna dress however she wants, only for them to find out that you've banned girls' clothes from your house? So many lies, Mr. Younger, so many reasons for people to distrust you. Though believe me when I say, it's not about to get much better for you when they see the following clip.
It says that I cannot discuss the litigation in the presence of the children, which is reasonable. I cannot allow a third party to do that as well. All that's reasonable. But look at the highlighted part. I'm permanently enjoined. That means I may not do it for the rest of my life. I may not make any video, do any interview, news interview, documentary, television appearance, radio appearance, internet radio appearance. I may not ever make a blog post. No social media posts. No social media posts picturing the children. I may not do live social media feeds of the children. I may not do any type of post, blog, broadcast, or recording, whether written or electronic, discussing the following political topics: cisgender, transgender, gender fluidity, gender dysphoria, gender identity, or even whether my sons are boys or girls. Now, it may come as no surprise to you since you're Republicans, and I hope it's no surprise to you as a judge candidate, that no judge has the authority to order me to shut up like that.
That's right.
Did you spot the lie? I'll give you a hint. It's not in the section Mr. Younger has highlighted. Rather, it's in the first paragraph, specifically the last half, which reads, quote, that petitioner Anne Georgelus and respondent Jeffrey Damon Younger are hereby enjoined while the children are under the age of 18 from, end quote. Emphasis added by me. So not only is Dr. Georgelus held to the same standard, something Mr. Younger never acknowledges, this is of course completely at odds with what Jeff just stated. Again, telling his audience that
I'm permanently enjoined. That means I may not do it for the rest of my life.
Apparently, Mr. Younger takes his Republican audience for suckers, assuming that they wouldn't understand the difference between while the children are under the age of 18 and the rest of my life. Sadly, they didn't do anything to prove him wrong on this. Not one of them had the integrity to call him out on his blatant lie. Not even the person Mr. Younger mentioned was a judge candidate. They just let the lie roll. Said act reeks of desperation, with Mr. Younger not even making it to the 3-minute mark before he's already lying. That's how hollow his ideology is. He literally cannot go 5 minutes without lying in some manner, painting himself as some poor victim for being ordered to not abuse his children. His lies are so damn numerous that sometimes I even miss them, like this nugget I showed at the 33-minute mark in my original video.
So he came to me and he has an Apple Watch. He came to me and he says, well, I want to record myself telling her that I want to be a boy so I can come show you that I have done that. Like I'm telling people. And I said, okay, that's your prerogative. I mean, in Texas, it's a one-party recording state and you can go record. And I told him not to hide anything and to be open about it. And he went in there and did that. And she completely freaked out over that. And I think what she freaked out over, she's afraid that other sessions were recorded.
Right.
And so she said that the children were very afraid of disobeying me for making that recording. And she called CPS and made a report on me. And on that basis, they took my kids away.
I was so concerned about the display of abusive behaviour here, how Luna very clearly hadn't been the one to suggest this plan and only did what her father demanded she do out of fear of retribution, that I completely missed the claim that it was this incident that lost him custody. The truth, meanwhile, is that Mr. Younger lost custody of both of his children because he refused to pay child support, with the judge ruling, quote, due to Mr. Younger's unwillingness or inability to follow the order designed to serve the best interest of the children, the court finds that it is necessary for the health and safety of the children that Ms. Georgelas have the following exclusive rights on a temporary basis. End quote. The judge then goes on to effectively give Dr. Georgelas full custody, only requiring a court order or Mr. Younger's consent for putting Luna on fully reversible puberty blockers, something that won't enter the equation for another few years due to Luna's age. We also still don't know if puberty blockers are something Luna will want to pursue at that age, regardless of being trans. However, due to the way Dr. Georgelas is working positively alongside Luna's court-ordered therapist to ensure the best quality of life for her child, that shouldn't be too difficult should the need arise. But yeah, nothing like what Mr. Younger asserted in the clip I just showed you. That's not to say Mr. Younger doesn't admit to failing to pay child support. In fact, he complained about how the court had set him up to fail child support payments so that they could take his children away.
So they do this, and then that leaves me not enough money to pay child support.
It's also not a blink and you miss it moment, with Mr. Younger mentioning child support 15 times. 15 in the stream.
Child support, 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 child support.
This of course omits the very important facts that Mr. Younger has received no less than $56,000 in donations and has enough free time and money to campaign for office. And that's just donations raised on GoFundMe. I have no doubt that Mr. Younger has also received private donations, both from Republican sponsors and his church. Are you starting to see what I mean when it comes to Mr. Younger taking his listeners for suckers? Now, fascism can't be consistent by definition. That's something we should never forget, else we can become lost in trying to make sense of why far-right voices, like Mr. Younger, contradict themselves so blatantly. Mr. Younger changes his story mid-interview because he has to. As a fascist, he has to paint himself both a warrior, valiantly fighting the state, but also a victim who lacks all power. He's built up so many mutually exclusive versions of his story that he has to tell them all, often at the same time, and just hope nobody thinks critically about what he's saying. Sadly for Mr. Younger, there's a lot of people out there who can actually think for themselves, as he discovered very recently during his visit to the University of North Texas. And, oh my god, is that the same bloody slide as from his last presentation? Yes it is. Also, props to whomever wrote this. Anyway, how about we hear what Mr. Younger has to say for himself when facing a critical audience?
This gag order prohibits me from talking about political topics. It prohibits me from talking to you about any transgender issue, anything about gender dysphoria. I'm not even allowed to tell you whether my son is a boy or a girl. Plus, it includes a lifetime ban from all social media, a lifetime ban from doing any radio interviews, newspaper interviews, television interviews, a lifetime ban. So this is clearly illegal. So I don't follow it. Because I didn't follow it, they took my children away from me on the 31st of July.
So again, the story has changed. No longer is it his children were taken from him for forcing Luna to prove that she was saying what he ordered her to say when he's not around. No longer is it even about his failure to pay child support, as the court document shows. Oh no! Now it's apparently because of the talks he's giving. That's when it happens. That's when someone in the audience calls Mr. Younger out on his bullshit.
They took my children away from me on the 31st of July. There's a weird thing about child support. I'm not late on child support, and I've been current on child support. It's really weird.
Why'd the court order say that?
It doesn't say that.
It does.
No.
We've all kind of seen it. You've kind of all seen it. So
Really?
just let
Because the records are sealed. So my guess is you're going off something the court has said. But no, I'm current on child support.
Lies indeed. Not only do we have access to the order stating very clearly that Mr. Younger's unwillingness to pay child support without first being threatened legally is why he lost custody of both of his children, but we also have Mr. Younger forwarding the conspiracy that the courts created the very conditions that led to his apparent inability to pay child support so that they could remove his children. Again, that ignores the tens of thousands of dollars Mr. Younger has received in donations. I also just have to say how much I love seeing Mr. Younger's expression here. He's just absolutely crushed by the fact that these teenagers are actually being critical of what he's saying, that they're not swallowing his bullshit. Speaking of, Mr. Younger is about to change the narrative again, falling on the ever popular excuse of lost in post.
But I'm current. What happened was during COVID, I think it was about 200,000 people in the child support system, in the Texas child support system at the Attorney General's office. They missed a payment, but they didn't notify anybody. So I didn't know until 3 months later. So I was a month behind for 3 months, but I paid every month. So that's what that was about.
Excuses. Blame COVID. Sure, you probably got COVID.
We're getting off topic.
Guys, hang on, stop. I can read, and that thing said that you are
Discussing cisgender,
within
transgender,
the hearing
gender
range of a
fluidity,
child.
gender
is what
dysphoria.
So we've gone from stating he failed to pay child support because the state made sure of it, to categorically denying that Mr. Younger failed to pay child support, to admitting he failed to pay child support, but blaming a clerical error. Surely, anyone watching this act, even Republicans, can see how these things are mutually exclusive. But again, he's sold so many lies at this point that it's difficult for Mr. Younger to keep track of which ones he's covered. It's also important to note that the courts would have had access to this information were it actually true. Something I bring up on account of the fact that the very first line of the court order I read from earlier states that, quote, all objections of Jeff Younger to the motion for production are overruled, end quote. That's to say, not a single one of Mr. Younger's arguments in court, which should include clerical error if that was an actual issue, had any merit. This tells us that he is, once again, lying to try and save his own skin. Another issue is the fact that these are monthly payments, meaning that Mr. Younger shouldn't be required to be notified to pay them. He should also care enough about his children that, in the event that such a payment hasn't been requested, he reaches out to check if everything is okay. Because his children are meant to be his responsibility. He is supposed to be a damn parent, so he should act like one. My parents divorced when I was only a few years old. It was an amicable breakup. They simply realized that they were two very different people. My father also agreed to pay child support without any sort of legal pressure. But it didn't stop there. Anytime my dad found out I had a school trip coming up or I needed new clothes, very often at the start of a new year as I entered my growth spurt, he'd always reach out to offer my mum further support. He also continued to pay child support even when I was no longer legally a child, doing so throughout my college years, what those of you in the US would call high school. Yet since my mum hadn't expected that and had made sure she was financially secure, what she did is she opened up a bank account into which she deposits said money each month to try and teach me the value of money and how to make it last. Something he supported completely. Because that's what parents are supposed to be like. They shouldn't need to be told by the state to take responsibility for their children or, as in Mr. Younger's case, threaten to do so. A good parent is proactive. That's why Dr. Georgelis did everything in her power to try and keep Mr. Younger part of Luna's life. That's why, in spite of having full medical custody, she changed Luna's original therapist to Dr. Pape, someone Mr. Younger completely supported as an independent therapist for Luna, until Dr. Pape reached the same conclusion as Luna's original therapist. Now, I have some additional thoughts about the UNT talk, though I'll need further time to look over the footage and assess all that. I know someone was injured by police at said event, so I'd rather approach that with caution. For now, however, I just want to leave you with a reminder of the sort of man we're dealing with. Because as much as Mr. Younger is incapable of telling the truth, and as much as he appears flabbergasted by literal teenagers, it's important not to underestimate him. The lies he's building are being called upon to fuel the anti-trans hysteria, the end goal of which Mr. Younger has been very clear about.
We are reaching a point where the family courts have become so abusive that in some of the rural counties that I've spoken in, there's open talk of judicial assassinations. There's open talk of outright insurrection. There's been cases where I've had sheriffs tell people, calm down, this isn't the right time for that. I mean, you're talking about stealing people's kids on an industrial scale. And if you keep doing that, you're going to have massive social unrest. That's why I love the background that you've got here. It's very appropriate because that's exactly where we're headed. It's an incredibly corrupt system, and it can't last much longer. It's just gotten to the point where it's so bad, and it has ruined so many men's lives. Dude, it's gonna make BLM, look like a Boy Scout rally. Your first recourse, always, in dealing with a problem is the letterbox. Send somebody a letter, explain the problem, and try to work it out. If that doesn't work, you've got the ballot box. You can try to pass a law that changes things to so that you think that they're right. If that doesn't work, you can always go to the jury box, right? You can have your citizens adjudicate a case, and if you're right, you'll win. If that doesn't work, all that's left is the cartridge box.
We need to take Mr. Younger seriously since he is endangering innocent Texan lives, both trans and cis, through his lies. And to everyone who took part in the protest, thank you for standing firm and not allowing this charlatan free rein. If you appreciate what we do here, please consider becoming one of our wonderful patrons who make all this possible. We rely heavily on your support to put food on the table and keep a roof over our heads. On that note, we'd just like to thank the following people: Matthew Kovac, Hannah Banghart, Gert Van Vorst, Cthulhu, Slosh Daniels, Higgins the Seagull, and Flynn. And for myself, Udita and Levi, take care now.